Another edition of Outside Shots presented by TheLines.com. You can follow us on X at TheLines.US. You can follow me at Eli Herskovich. I'll introduce my guest co-host in just a moment. But remember, if you're looking to bet over at BetMGM Sportsbook, first-time users can use promo code TheLines, one word, to get up to $5. If you bet $5, you get $150 in bonus bets instantaneously. That's promo code TheLines, one word, with BetMGM Sportsbook. All of the disclaimers are over at TheLines.com. You can find our bets in real time in the Lines Discord channel. The link is over at TheLines.com in the top right-hand corner. Now it's time to bring aboard Justin Perry. You can follow him at Justin Perry 8 content lead over at Shot Quality Bets. What's going on, Justin? You had a big win for St. John's over the weekend that you attended against Creighton.
Yeah, good to be back, Eli. Good to see you again. I had a great weekend, talking about that St. John's game I got to go see. It was honestly so much fun to watch them pull away. I think such a tell. The crowd really wasn't too certain that St. John's was really going to win until we got into like the last 2 to 3 minutes, and it was a 10-point lead. And Jenkins hit like a dagger mid-range shot to put him up 14. Kind of felt that relief for the whole city, the whole fandom, that maybe we are really going to get this tournament game for New York's team. Really excited. I was decked out in my NIL, Rick Pitino, and full team gear, always supporting the guys. So it's a lot of fun. It's great to have real, like, major level college basketball back in the city. Of course, I love my mid-majors, but the excitement, Madison Square Garden, beating Creighton, it's different. It's different.
I thought the biggest difference in the game, really quick, and we discussed it on last week's episode of Outside Shots, St. John's closing around +2.5, +3, so Creighton around a one possession favorite on the close, and obviously St. John's covering some alt spreads if you decided to go with the Rick Pitino Armani suit angle. But the one thing that stood out to me, Glenn Taylor played 30-plus minutes, 10 boards, 3 offensive rebounds and 6 assists. I thought he was really good in transition with his decision-making. And not only has St. John struggled with its transition defense, but also with its transition offense. I mean, you think about guys like Chris Ledlum and RJ Lewis, who have really struggled to make those precise passes when St. John's has been on the break in some one-possession games. Like, one game stands out was at Providence. I think both Lewis and Ledlum had critical turnovers in the final 5 minutes in transition. So Taylor was really good, and the fact that he's back in the starting 5 and getting major minutes, I think, really helped out that Johnny's offense.
Yeah, it was great to see. Really excited to watch them maybe take form a little bit. Of course, there's a lot to still have happen, and they probably need another big test. This was a letdown spot, if there ever was going to be one, for Creighton, who quote unquote played their Super Bowl against UConn just the week before, getting a big win, coming east from Nebraska. Never going to be easy. St. John's sort of ready in the weight there. I didn't think their Georgetown win by 5 on the road was very convincing, so they were probably waiting to get up for this game. I'm not sold on St. John's in like a run this season or anything in the tournament, but I definitely do trust Rick Pitino to get the program trending upwards in years to come.
Yeah, and St. John's also just a perfect matchup against Creighton's drop coverage. There's only so much you could do with Kalkbrenner, only so much McDermott can do with Kalkbrenner on the floor, only so many adjustments he could really make, like we saw in the first matchup when St. John's nearly pulled off the upset in Omaha. But some other takeaways to keep in mind as we kind of look ahead to the week that is. By the way, St. John's going to be around a 1-point dog at Butler on Wednesday night in Hinkle. But Wake Forest upsetting, quote unquote, even though the Demon Deacons were 2.5 3-point home favorites against Duke. And the reason why I say upset in quotes is because they stormed the court. Now, typically in that situation, when a court storm happens, the team is an underdog, like we saw with Creighton against UConn. Now, Wake Forest wasn't ranked. Duke, top 10 team, I think, per the AP top 25. So typically, I'm sure some students were aware of the fact that Wake Forest was a favorite, even though sports betting is coming to North Carolina actually in a couple weeks right ahead of the ACC tournament. But the big news coming out of the court storm, Kyle Filipowski suffering an ankle injury. John Shire said earlier today as we record this on Monday that he's unsure if he's going to be ready to practice this week, and he hasn't had x-rays yet. Now, the latter nugget makes me think it's not too big of an injury. You would think if it was a serious ankle injury that he would have had x-rays. But you have guys like Billis coming out earlier today saying that court stormers should get arrested. You could handle it better, like we saw at Creighton, kind of protecting the bench, the away bench with UConn, in the sense of making sure none of their players got trampeded or hurt. But there's a difference between having the utmost protection security-wise for the opponent and then saying fans should get arrested.
Look, to Jay's credit, he said, arrest them once, trap one group of court stormers on the court, detain them all, and then no one would ever do it again as the example. I don't think he's saying arrest every single one in perpetuity. But I mean, what a take. I'm not really of that same mindset. I understand, obviously, player safety is paramount. We need every single major player as healthy as possible to give every single credit we can to the eventual champion. Right, you don't want that asterisk of, oh, Kyle Filipowski got injured and Duke wasn't at full strength, and and they were, you don't want to give people excuses, especially not Duke fans. And I think we've seen a lot of bias. Duke is probably one of the strongest brands in college basketball. A lot of talking heads come from Duke. Jay Billis, Duke guy, I've worked on Coach K's staff. You're going to get a little bit of a lean probably, but he did also say that the media is clearly a little bit more complicit than maybe they make out to be. We show those shots in the media. We used to not. So it definitely is encouraged. I think it's fun. It's part of college basketball. I get Duke, a top 10 team, a big school. Wake is a much improved program. Winning this game is probably not something that used to be as in the cards, and the students probably were not taking it as, a foregone conclusion just because you're minus 2.5. I mean, I hope we as gamblers don't take that as a foregone conclusion just because the line is set somewhere either. So still a really big win as a program for Wake. I'm not going to sit there and say they shouldn't storm because they're a one basket favorite. If you're a 3.5 possession favorite, we can start talking. But Wake, this is still a big win. I think there are obvious discussions that need to be had, maybe about I don't know, some timers, some type of more enhanced security in specific situations where a storm could be brewing. But, we don't have the storm chasers anymore from Barstool to tell us when it's going to happen. But I still think the administrations do know, the leagues can anticipate it, and maybe a little bit more security personnel or an awareness to the fact, even when you're a player. It's been happening for years. I don't think we can do away from it. And I don't want the most impassioned fans who make college basketball what it is to be told, no more showing your love for your team when they get, a momentum-defining, season-defining win.
It was Wake Forest's biggest win in the Steve Forbes era, too. Not only, probably in school history, honestly, when you think about college basketball at Wake. Yep. But one of the things that impressed me, along with Hunter Salas, the Gonzaga transfer, playing so well offensively, 29 points, 5 of 6 from 3. I mean, he was lethal everywhere he shot the basketball, especially when Tyrese Proctor was guarding him. And that was an issue when those teams played the first time around at Cameron Indoor, except Wake Forest just shot terribly from 3. So when Duke adjusted and switched everything, which is what that defense tends to do, Wake Forest really couldn't do anything about it. But Wake shot 9 of 17 from 3. Also, Cam Hildreth, one of the more unheralded point guards in college basketball to me. Not only because, he had an efficient game to an extent himself, especially getting to the line, getting to the rim, but also playing through a broken wrist and playing that well. Only 2 turnovers. He's maybe not their primary ball handler. Salas handles the basketball too, but technically Wake Forest point guard. So that stood out to me, the fact that he's playing through that injury and did it and helped Wake get the win, even though it wasn't technically an upset from a betting standpoint. But one last note from the weekend that was in college basketball. Houston tied with Purdue for the second shortest odds to win the national championship. You could price shop over at thelines.com right around plus 750. And this is by far Calvin Sampson's best team when you look at offense and defense on a per possession basis. Winning at Baylor, closing as around 2.5 point favorites. I think you cashed with the Cougs when we discussed this bet, or the market doing it ahead of the weekend card last week on Outside Shots. But, man, Jamal Shead was so good. 10 assists, only 2 turnovers. Houston trailed for only 24 seconds of 45 minutes, even though Baylor nearly covered and obviously pulling off the outright upset, or nearly doing so. But among higher usage players in college basketball, you look at those who have at least 14 possessions per game with the ball in their hands. His assist to turnover ratio, Jamal Shead, I'm talking about the 3rd best nationally per synergy. So not only is he in the conversation, probably the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, but just one of the best pure point guards in the country.
Yep, I fully agree. And again, some of his play has just been so unbelievable. I'm such a big fan of what they've done in Houston. It feels like their time is coming. They continue to build these teams that I think, I would say do it unconventionally, right? We actually just sent out a tweet about it from Shot Quality. They are, 351st in rim and 3 rate. They do not take the most effective shots. They take a lot of mid-range shots, but they slow that tempo down. They get good looks. And they're still able to convert because they play to their players' strengths, right? Like they have designed their offense to effectively take advantage of what their players are able to do. And so Shot Quality gives them a lot of respect for it. They are far and away right now the best team in shot quality. And, you probably could have gotten a better price, but if you want to ride with that team that looks good on the outside and looks good under the hood, it's going to be Houston.
On to the weeknight slate as we get started with Tuesday night games. Just a heads up, Justin and I are recording this before the market for much of these games opens up. We do have the Tuesday spreads for the 3 games we're going to discuss on Tuesday night's card, but Wednesday and Thursday we're obviously doing this with projections for myself, Haslametrics, and Shot Quality, the great work that Justin and his team do over at Shot Quality and Shot Quality Bets. But getting started with Kentucky at Mississippi State on Tuesday night. Bulldogs opening as a 2.5-point home favorite, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. Haslam makes this game, though, closer to Mississippi State -1. I actually have it closer to a pick. So you're kind of getting both of these teams at peak market value, especially with Mississippi State on that 5-game winning streak. I know Kentucky lost at LSU last week, but dominating Alabama. I think you cashed on that bet as well, Justin. So shout out to you for that one last week on Outside Shots. But how are you gauging this one, and what does Shot Quality make the number?
Yeah, so this one, Shot Quality has really close, a 1-point win for Kentucky here on the road over Miss State at 81-80. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Some preliminary lines starting to roll in a little bit here. We're going to probably like that Kentucky side. And it's definitely one of those spot tax things that we talked about, right? This is a home team in Mississippi State that I feel like is going to get a lot of love from the market, and probably rightfully so. I mean, this is going to be a difficult spot for Kentucky coming off of what a game. And obviously you don't necessarily often score 117 points. It was an unbelievable performance. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the market kind of, expect maybe some regression. Shot Quality really did see that game as much lower scoring for Alabama, Kentucky. Kentucky shot 75% on shots at the rim, their 3rd best of the season, 54% from 3, 13 of 24. So not just by percent, but obviously by volume too. It was their 4th best shooting performance by percent behind the line. So it's going to be hard to repeat that. Shot Quality expected a much more pedestrian 86 points to 83. So just lit it up. It's going to be hard to do it again. I do get why the market's going to go towards Miss State, but I personally tend to stay a little stickier. I'll hopefully see if I can get something like +3. If it moves to like +3.5, count me in on Kentucky.
Yeah, and I want to stay on the tax that we discussed in previous episodes, and also with this game in particular, because a trend I saw since 2017, unranked teams, 179, 97 straight up, 64.9% when listed as a home favorite versus a ranked opponent. And that's good for a plus 5.6% ROI. So maybe you take Mississippi State on the money line if you like that trend. And I am not stating that trend just for context to say, okay, back it, Mississippi State, back the Bulldogs. Just to provide a little context to it, though, it's typically when the market thinks the road underdog is overvalued. So it really depends on what you make of Kentucky. Is their market power rating too high at this point? And it obviously is, to the point that you brought up a little bit ago. It's a revenge game for Mississippi State. So the market trending in that direction too when it comes to the point spread, losing by double digits at Kentucky at Rupp in mid-January. Right. Now, just going back to the Alabama game, you mentioned how efficient Kentucky was at the rim. They probably used their most efficient lineup of the season. Dillingham, Reed Shepard, Antonio Reeves, Justin Edwards, who was so good from behind the arc. Probably his best long-range shooting efficiency of the season. And Big Z. I think Cal said that the European transfer, he decided to play in major minutes when he woke up in the morning or something like that. So first time in a while.
It worked out, man. It worked out. And Justin Edwards, really quick, overperformance by 14 points. It's crazy.
Wow. No, good nugget for sure. So maybe you think he regresses offensively, which he very well could in a tough road environment. But just a couple nuggets that I don't have a big enough edge in this game to advocate any bet, but a couple of reasons why I make the game a pick and why I kind of side with you with Kentucky, even though we're going to see it, Justin. We both know it. Kentucky going to be the public dog on Twitter, of course, on X, because that matters so much in the context of any betting market. But Mississippi State, obviously a true low post offense. And this is probably the first true low post offense that Kentucky's facing since about a week and a half ago when they played at Auburn. And keep in mind, Kentucky only allowed a 54.2% clip at the rim, which is pretty good. And the Wildcats also rank in the top 50 when it comes to near proximity field goal percentage allowed overall. So we're probably going to see less of Big Z in this game, more of Onyenso, who played 36 minutes against Auburn, didn't play nearly as many minutes against Alabama, which makes sense because Cal had a little bit of a different game plan in that game, and for a good reason. Also, a couple other reasons why I'm hesitant to back Mississippi State here, even though Tolu Smith maybe gets his against Onyenso a couple more times than Broome and Cardwell did against Kentucky's rim defense. Mississippi State ranks in the 14th percentile when it comes to transition points allowed across college basketball. And with this game potentially being so tight in terms of the point spread, Bulldogs rank 324 in the country in free throw percentage. Outside of Josh Hubbard, who shoots at about 80% from the free throw line, Shaquille Moore is the next best free throw shooter on this team in the low 70s. I mean, it's not only a tough team to back come tournament time, but in this game, right?
Yeah. No, it's a definite issue. It's always sort of been a problem with this team, and we've talked about it for a long time. Shooting woes. You talk about what is shot quality on Mississippi State. We go to those fun miscellaneous stats. We rank shot making, right? Because we understand how difficult shots are and then how good players are at making them to come up with our analysis that we can then also, the extra factor in there is like how good you are therefore at making shots. So Mississippi State as a whole coming in 284th. That's 13th in the SEC. It does not get much worse. So it's going to be tough. They need to develop good looks to score, right? They're going to have a tough time if you can keep them from getting to their desired spot. They don't really develop a lot of open looks from deep, but they do take a lot of shots from rim and three. So they're not getting great looks, and they're not going to convert a lot of them. So there's a lot to worry about, but they are also going to kind of be shot quality darlings because they should be making more shots. It seems last year, Mississippi State was the unluckiest team in all of shot quality. So you were able to get a little bit of an early season edge on that being a little too baked into some of the priors. But at this point, they're just showing it again. The shooting woes have not gone away.
On to BYU at Kansas. This one, it's the Big 12 deal with ESPN. It's on ESPN Plus, even though it's a pretty good matchup. Kansas opening around 5.5, -5.5, -6 at Allen Fieldhouse. And Haslam actually projects it closer to Jayhawks -4.5. I have it around Kansas -3.5, -4. But keep in mind, Kansas dealing with a big injury, Kevin McCullough knee injury, likely keeping him out of this game. And Bill Self actually said yesterday he's more so week to week than day to day, which makes me very skeptical about Kansas long term if this could affect him not only in the Big 12 tournament, but come March Madness. What do you guys at shot quality make this game?
I pick them. It's a bold one. BYU going in here it's going to be tough for them. I don't know how I personally feel about that projection. Of course, getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but going into Kansas for this game is never going to be easy. BYU struggling a little bit, right? They haven't covered in 5 of their last 6, taken some losses to Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Kansas State now. I tend to like Kansas here personally, but the shot quality number is definitely going to say grab BYU, which makes a lot of sense because shot quality expected BYU to cover a lot of these games. It had a 86-71 win for BYU at Kansas State, had a 80-68 win, which was pretty close to actual versus Baylor, but then expected a win versus Oklahoma State, expected a bigger win against UCF, expected a win versus Kansas State, expected a win versus Oklahoma. So yeah, it's been a good shot quality year for BYU. They are number 8 in shot quality right now, missing a win in their record per SQ in total. But yeah, they're deadly. Good spacing, good shooting, kind of on a down run, and maybe don't fully deserve it. A tool I really like to use from SQ is narrowing the regression stats down just to conference play. And you can see that BYU is really getting the worst of it from their opponents in terms of facing hot, shooting 3-point percentage, 3-point higher than expected on defense. And they're really also getting it at the rim too. They're allowing a 59% success rate from the rim, shot quality expecting 55. So considering how often those types of shots are taken, you're talking about a good, 4 or 5 points a game difference on average in conference play right now, at the least, for what BYU is doing. So it wouldn't be shocking to me if it turns out, in retrospect, this was a great time to buy in on BYU, a down stretch in late February. We've seen it before with teams that go on to win championships or go on runs. It's not as crucial as we might think in the minute. I remember, UConn having the same type of issue here. So BYU could definitely round out, be a dangerous tournament team. It's their first year traveling to a lot of these spots, dealing with this Big 12 conference schedule. I think once they get back to some neutral court games, they might look as deadly as they did early season. I'm definitely buying in on BYU there, but going to the Fog, man, I'm still waiting. maybe even a better spot to buy them after they lose this game.
Right, and that's kind of my line of thinking there. I think the reason why the market may be inflating this one a bit, it's kind of for good reason. To your point, BYU maybe should be covering more times than not, but that's because they've struggled to shoot well on the road, which showed up against Kansas State, and also BYU ranks number 355 in Haslam's away from home metric. So this one coming at one of the toughest road environments in college basketball. And by the way, just for context, they shot around 19.4% from deep against Kansas State on Saturday. Also, just a couple nuggets for Kansas, even without McCullough. Bill Self kind of commenting about his rotation after the game, and they played a pretty efficient game against Texas, blowing them out. But he wanted to kind of stagger the minutes with Johnny Furphy and Nick Timberlake, and both of those guys actually in Kansas's starting lineup, along with DeJuan Harris, Hunter Dickinson, and KJ Adams. So by default, Timberlake essentially starting for McCullough. But among the Jayhawks starters, Furphy and KJ Adams were plus 16.2 in points per 100 possessions per CBB Analytics, which is Kansas's best two-man combination this season. Kind of stunning to read and dig into a little bit. And then Amarco Jackson and Jamari McDowell have only played 64 minutes together, so it's a small sample size, but they're plus 25.2 in points per 100 possessions, and they had actually the highest plus-minus when it came to two-man sets against Texas. So maybe Self has kind of found something. You sometimes hear the cliche, you grow a little bit when, or it's not, I'm not stating the exact cliche, but you grow when an injury happens and you got to figure out your rotation on the fly. Jayhawks might have found something, even though they definitely lack depth, with that being said.
Look, that's what I'm telling myself about my Knicks right now. I know a little segue, but you miss all your best players. You're figuring out guys, where they can get shots, how you can continue to free up good looks, because basketball, this is shot quality's whole mantra. Basketball is more about the process, and that's more repeatable, and getting good looks even when you don't have your best guys in is really great practice, because, if McCullough comes back healthy, he's going to have to sit in the tournament, and they're going to need those same guys who stepped up, in his absence, to step up on the second unit against a red hot team that's looking to, knock them out of the tournament. So I like it. I think it definitely does, build character or whatever you want to call it. But look, Bill Self is one of the greatest coaches in the game right now. I would not count him out. I definitely lean towards Kansas. I've seen -5.5, -6. I would not be shocked to see that, when the limits get taken off tomorrow, be around -7.
If BYU wants any shot of not only competing at the Fog, but also in the tournament, to your point, maybe a little bit of a buy point, just depending on the way the market gauges them come March Madness. But Jackson Robinson shot 1 of 9 from 3. Their leading scorer. I know BYU is pretty well distributed when it comes to the scoring department, points per game, but you're going to need Robinson to shoot better off the bench than 1 of 9 like he did against K-State over the weekend. But third and final game that we're going to hit Justin here on the Tuesday slate, Loyola-Chicago at St. Bonaventure. This one opened Bonnie's -3.5, and it's probably going to surprise some people, even though Haslam makes it Bonnie -4, St. Bonaventure -4, and I have it right around -4 as well. Loyola-Chicago, they've won 4 straight. They're tied with Richmond atop the A-10 standings, and a little bit of a look-ahead spot, too, with Dayton, a huge A-10 clash in Chicago on Friday night. So you look at the standings, you say, okay, how is St. Bonaventure a 2-possession favorite at home? Obviously, a lot of reasons why, so I'll let you take it first.
I mean, yeah, this is a really interesting one. Loyola-Chicago starting off super weak. Early season talk was, they're going to fade, but you go look at some of the graphs, it has been trending up and up and up, and it hasn't really slowed down. Big win against George Mason by almost 20. I love this game because it's a clash of directions, and the Bonnies have been kind of going the wrong way. But they have one of the best home courts in the country. It's just the truth of the matter. This is a huge game. They have some incredible support. It's going to be rocking there. And Bonnie, they need this win. They are not atop the conference. Like you said, there's some major players right now. Richmond is actually tied with Loyola-Chicago. Dayton's in third. So the A-10, these last final 4 games are shaping up to be really exciting. It's going to be a fun tournament in Brooklyn when we get to Barclays. But shot quality makes this one right around the line, right there around 3-point win for St. Bonnie's. Maybe a little bit of that market favorability towards the home team here because you have that look-ahead spot. You have a red-hot Loyola-Chicago who has just been running out of their boots, honestly, Eli. The 20-point win expected to be only 2 over George Mason. They had that win over St. Joseph's expected to be a loss, which was, I guess pretty fair at home. St. Joseph's can be good, but definitely running a little hot, looking like a team that might be worth kind of going against right now. But personally, I'm a little worried about the Bonnies. I do think Loyola-Chicago could come in there and bring that momentum in and just continue to find good shots as they have. So no personal play for me on this one yet. Of course, a New York game, so I really do have to wait for Tuesday to get my hands on this one.
Well, kind of digging into shot quality and some overall numbers over at CBB Analytics. So Loyola's post defense, I think per shot quality has been due to regress, and we've kind of seen it of late per the numbers. They're allowing the 5th ranked overall 2-point scoring defense in the country. So their rim defense and post-up defense has been good all season, but negative regression has started to come, like you guys over at Shot Quality have thought was due, at least in conference play. So their paint defense over their last 10 games ranked in the 44th percentile. So if St. Bonaventure gets Chad Venning some good looks down low, I know Loyola has some size, but maybe teams struggling a little too much, and Venning is a pretty good post-up player. And then also Loyola dead last in the conference when it comes to turnover percentage offensively. And this Bonaventure ball pressure led by, I think, the Cincinnati transfer, Mike Adams-Woods, second highest turnover rate forced in conference play. So I think it is a good matchup. I get it if you don't want to get in front of the Loyola-Chicago train, even though it's a look-ahead spot. Per my numbers, I think this line is pretty fair, but still, it could be not a letdown, but it could be a little bit of a look ahead for the Ramblers if they're gearing too far ahead to the Dayton matchup on Friday.
My big worry right now, Eli, is that regression is looming for St. Bonaventure's offense too. I mean, sitting here right now, 1.12 points per possession in the season. Shot quality expecting 1.04, shooting 37% from deep on the season, 40% from mid-range, 57% at the rim. These are just hard to sustain numbers, and they're already having a down year. So if you can believe it, it might not be as, buy low as you might think, right? So I don't know. I'm definitely thinking about Loyola. Just, I think at this time of the year, when you see teams kind of change direction and maybe find their groove after struggling, even if they're overperforming, sometimes that can be them sort of getting that mojo, that back, that, that when you look at it long term is more of like the correction from the underperformance, not as indicative as future underperformance. And yes, you're bordering on reading tea leaves at this point, but it's also part of like understanding like the program, I guess the desires and what the coaches are going for, and the trajectory and how they're actually playing. So I do like what I'm seeing out of Loyola-Chicago. I do think they are expecting themselves to make a really big run here. I had a preseason future on them to win this conference, so I'll probably stick to my guns and stay on them and expect a season-defining win here, maybe in a little bit of a reverse look ahead, so that if they struggle and lose at Dayton, they still hold that one-game lead in the standings.
There you go.
You're game. Yeah,
it's trying to be optimistic about
getting the tinfoil hat on a little, but late season college basketball, sometimes that's as good as any strategy, honestly. So the numbers definitely do back it up. Bonnie's looming a little of regression. Loyola in their ascension. So I think I might trust what I'm seeing a bit.
Yeah, and I think the market, to your point, is also pricing in maybe Loyola outperforming expectations in some games. Like you mentioned, St. Joe's, they shouldn't have covered that game. It was a 3-point game down the stretch. They closed 4.5-point home favorites, and then St. Joe's fouls with, I think, under a second to go, and Loyola goes to the line. That one on Valentine's Day, too. So anybody with a St. Joe's ticket out to dinner probably maybe threw some food around and probably got broken up with.
Yeah, I didn't get dessert for sure.
Exactly. On to the Wednesday card and the marquee matchup, one of the marquee matchups of the week. Tennessee has two huge games this week, not only against Auburn in this Wednesday game, but also going to Alabama, Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, potential revenge spot for the Tide. But looking at this midweek one in particular, Auburn at Tennessee, Haslam makes this closer to Tennessee -3. I have it around Vols -2.5 just because I make it a pick 'em on a neutral court. Jalen Williams, even though the injury report hasn't been announced just yet, presumably out with that knee injury. Tennessee destroying A&M on Saturday night by 30+. Auburn not struggling at all in Jalen Williams' first game. Missing from that knee injury. I want to go over some things that I really actually liked about Auburn from that performance in his absence. But what do you make of this one, Justin?
I mean, tough game to really get a sense on. Either of these teams, I feel like, could just come out ahead. There might be some merit to just expecting like the winning margin by either team to be like 10 points, because someone's going to get the better of the other. Someone's going to find a way through this matchup and learn to limit the other throughout the game, figure out how to penetrate the defense. It's going to be it's going to be very, very interesting. Of course, both teams excelling on both sides of the ball, top 20 offenses per shot quality. Tennessee a top 15 defense, Auburn a top 40 defense. Neither one really expected to see much regression. Auburn's offense maybe overperforming a little bit. They look maybe a little bit more like a top 10 offense. Again, shot quality saying a little bit more like top 20. Man, it's going to be a crazy game. Both these teams can, shoot with the best of them. Good catch and shoot 3-point shooters, good 3-point percentages. But yeah, I think I lean a little bit towards the under if I had to make a play on this one. I think you're probably going to see a total maybe close to like 150. Shot quality going to make this like 147.5, projected Tennessee to win by 1.5 points right now. So it should be a very interesting one. Looks like the catch and shoot 3-point percentage for Tennessee is going to make a big deal, and Auburn's going to need to finish at the rim over Tennessee to really get it done. So I'll be watching on those early to see how that gets started, and maybe place a live bet depending on how shot quality expects them to be doing.
Looking at your potential bet for this game, both teams combined to score. I think this was their lone matchup, or actually Auburn played Tennessee in the regular season finale, winning that game by 9. But when they played in Knoxville, a combined 89 points. I kid you not. So maybe worth a look to the under. But, and kind of to that point, because I was watching the Auburn game a little bit against Georgia, and Bruce Pearl was throwing out some interesting lineup combinations without Jalen Williams, obviously, in the rotation. He actually played some Janine Broome, Dylan Cardwell minutes, and they combined for, when they were on the floor together, net rating of plus 56, offensive effective field goal percentage of 68.8%, a defensive effective field goal percentage of 31.3% when they were on the floor. So, and that kind of makes sense when you kind of look at the eye test, because you have two huge bigs and probably a good chance to create second chance shots. And to that point, Tennessee has struggled to limit second chance opportunities in SEC play. And if you do decide to go some Broome Cardwell minutes again, I'm talking about Pearl, it does match up well if Barnes goes with Adu and Awaka for stretches like he did in the Texas A&M game over the weekend, and of late too, because Tennessee has struggled a little bit on the defensive glass, like I mentioned. One area of concern I have for Auburn, among others, but kind of the key one, is the point guard matchup. Zakai Ziegler against A&M, 14 assists, 0 turnovers, the most assists from any player this season without a turnover per Sports Reference, which stacks up. You wouldn't expect a player to have 14 dimes and 0 turnovers. But going up against Aiden Holloway, who was reinserted back into Auburn's starting lineup after that bye week, essentially, he did come on well, and he finally got his stroke back, 5 of 8 from behind the arc. But tough road environment. I just wonder how he's going to perform, because he has performed inconsistently when it comes to his shooting efficiency beyond the win at Georgia and the cover for the Tigers on Saturday night. One other thing to mention, too, when it comes to a defensive matchup, and then I'll swing it back to you. Denver Jones against Dalton Knecht is going to be interesting, because Jones has transformed into one of the best shadow defenders really in college basketball to me. So I'm really wondering how that's going to match up against one of the best scorers off ball and on ball in Dalton Knecht. So a lot of interesting matchups. Stay away for me numbers wise. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of analyzing some of these major matchups. And I like this game as a nice test for both of these programs for what it's going to be like come March. Because, again, elite teams, maybe one of the best matchups on the SEC calendar right now in just terms of how this conference is looking. I'm really excited about this one, honestly. Auburn, again, I think it's still leaning towards the under. I'm looking at some of these stats. The shot selection allowed is elite. Of course, in terms of the side, I do think Tennessee might be able to cut up the defense a bit, because really Auburn allows really good spacing to their opponents. And like you mentioned, Tennessee's passing is very, very high level. So if they can get some good spacing, some good cuts to the rim, I do think Tennessee probably edges this game out, but a low-scoring one really does feel like it's in the cards here. You're going to see probably a pretty good amount of transition be attempted, right? Both these defenses both these offenses try to run in transition a fair amount, especially Auburn, who's ranking in the top 25 teams in terms of frequency. I'm interested to see how that goes, right? Tennessee, a pretty stout defense in terms of keeping opponents from getting those easy looks. Again, that all sort of just continues to point towards the under. Every bucket's going to be at a premium. This is late season, big battle, seeding in the tournament, seeding in the SEC tournament too. So there's a lot happening here. And I just like it to come down to the last buckets, some good defensive stands. And I'll take the under on that one.
Don't blame me there at all. I think if it opens around 150, even 147.5, which is the projection from Haslam, probably a little bit inflated. And to your point about spacing out Auburn's defense, also wondering how often Barnes will go with not Janai Broome, obviously he's opposing Janai Broome, but will kind of put Josiah Jordan-James at the 5, because that would completely space out Auburn's defense. And Broome can get spaced out when you think about ball screens and getting him matched up against some 1s and 2s. We've seen that, especially going back to that first Alabama-Auburn matchup, when Mark Sears took advantage a couple times, or a few times even, when he was matched up with Broome at the top of the arc in one-on-one situations, whether it was off the dribble threes or just off the dribble attempts at the rim. And he got the best of a little bit of a slow-footed Broome and even Dylan Cardwell in that first meeting before Auburn got revenge. On to another matchup, this one between two unranked teams in the Big Ten, Northwestern at Maryland. Haslam makes this Maryland -3. I actually have it. This is probably, if this one opens under a full possession, Justin, probably my biggest edge of the games we're discussing. I make it closer to Maryland -4.5, -5, and want to dig into some numbers, and I'll do that in a moment after you go. But one thing about Maryland, when you think about, they're not only one of the unluckiest teams in the Big Ten, but arguably the unluckiest team in college basketball. 1-9 in games decided by 5 points, so 2 possessions or fewer this season. One of those losses coming at Northwestern in January, so a bit of a revenge spot for the Terps. They rank number 348th in three-point percentage, highest turnover rate in Big Ten play. So you would maybe expect a team to struggle in a 1 or 2 possession game when those 2 variables aren't going your way. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, this is a really, really interesting game. Northwestern has been kind of a powerhouse. I mean, like you said, Maryland a little unlucky, but I've liked this Northwestern team as a team to just be betting on. Sitting here, their ATS record like 15-12, not exactly powerhouse, but still a lot of green recently, covering 4 of their last 5. I think 7 of their last 9. So yeah, kind of all getting those wins against the spread recently. Has felt pretty reliable in terms of just beating market expectations. Shot quality is going to have this one with you, Eli. 4.7 to be exact. So call it 5. This should be a fun matchup for these teams. Northwestern has been very stingy with the ball, and Maryland's going to be, I think, a team that maybe challenges that, especially at home. They do have a decent forced turnover rate in terms of what they can do on defense, force some tough shots, top 7 percentile in terms of defensive shot selection allowed, have faced some good shot making. So I think like that speaks to your point of how unlucky they are. Teams have come in and shot at a top 20 percentile, like luckiness shot making ability rate. So teams actually coming in and hitting some tough shots against them, maybe a little bit leading towards some perception that they aren't as good as they might actually be. They limit open threes on defense. They're really good at getting to the free throw line. So I think for a home team, that's what you really do want to see. So they're going to get those fouls. They're going to get those good looking points at the line there. And everything else kind of stacks up. Their real, I guess, issue in terms of what their offense brings is probably ending up in too many isolation possessions. So especially when you slow it down like Maryland does, it can get a little bit sticky. But Northwestern, they should give Maryland every chance to get a nice win here. They're also slow, so I would expect this number to open pretty low. Like, the shot quality projection right now is 131. So expect a low total, expect a rock fight, and maybe even consider still going under just because of the way some of these possessions are just bound to end up with isolation, turnaround, mid-range jumpers.
Yeah, Maryland coming off of that blowout win at Rutgers, but I think the total still was around in the low 110 range in terms of the combined points between the two teams.
Rare these days, man, with how the offense looks across college basketball. But yeah, it's still the Big Ten.
Right. And one other thing to the point that you brought up about Northwestern covering so much of late, over the last 10 games, so one game kind of stretching it out one game further, because you mentioned 7-2 ATS in their last 9. Road loss at Nebraska. Nebraska is a powerhouse at home. If the national championship game was played in Lincoln, I'm pretty sure Nebraska would win the national title. You have an overtime win over Illinois at home. That was Terrence Shannon's first game back. Honestly, probably a little lucky to get into overtime in that one. A home win against a Chris Holtmann-led Ohio State team that is playing better under Jake Diebler, like we saw in that upset win at Michigan State over the weekend. Overtime losses at Purdue, at Minnesota. Kind of fortunate to get to both of those overtime statures in that regard. And then home wins, a home win against Nebraska. Like I mentioned, Nebraska much different on the road versus at home. A road loss at Rutgers, not a good Scarlet Knights team. No. Road win at Indiana, not even close to a good Hoosiers team. And then a home win against Michigan that had 2 key injuries and no Doug McDaniel. Kind of gave Purdue some fits in the first half on Sunday, even though I think the Boilermakers wound up covering the spread, or it was pretty tight. Also, Ty Berry out for the season, their best three-point shooter, arguably their best defender, or at least around the arc. And a couple of the reasons why I like Maryland, really, really good pick and roll defense, which is what Boo Buie relies on. And Maryland also, I mean, overall atop the number one defensive efficiency in Big Ten play. But Northwestern's opponents rank in the 89th percentile in offensive rebounding rate. And like you mentioned, Maryland, a really good team at getting to the line because they generate a lot of second chance shots. Julian Reese and Jordan Geronimo, two of the better second chance creators in the Big Ten. And Geronimo also healthy, which is why I think Maryland is starting to play a little bit better. I actually, believe it or not, man, I have Maryland power rated close with Wisconsin. I know Maryland's depth is an issue. I know they don't shoot well, but I may be looking to bet Maryland Big Ten futures just because I still really like this team, and they've gotten unlucky, and they have played better away from home than they did last year. So I'm curious if that'll translate to a neutral court-ish at, in Minnesota for the Big Ten tournament. But I really like Maryland in this spot.
Yeah, I think I agree. The issue for Maryland right now, obviously, you go take a look at some of their, four factors and the percents they allow on defense, and coming in as a top 6 defense in KenPom is not easy, right? It is a difficult thing to do, especially when you allow the 346th lowest free throw percentage against. So if they can calm down, keeping those hands to themselves a little bit, like the effective field goal percentage is beautiful. Their defensive, at the rim is incredible. Like they don't allow you to take a lot of threes. They're forcing opponents into like good looks in terms of what, you want on a defense. So yeah, I think, you have something like that, it could definitely come together. The offense is definitely missing. I think they will, have a chance to get out of the first, second round, come tournament time potentially. But there's still something I think a little bit missing. Kevin Willard doing a good job, but that same type of departure against the top seed in the second round of the tournament seems pretty likely in terms of where they're going to end. But I definitely like them in terms of a potential run in a Big Ten conference tournament where we routinely see that like some of the teams with their eyes set forward in the championship can sometimes bow out a little early, and the defense might very well end up winning it for a team in that conference championship. So yeah, I like it. I think it's a good angle. Maryland could definitely surprise some people. I don't think they're expecting to go for, cutting down the nets in Phoenix this year, but they could definitely, surprise a few people in Minnesota.
Yeah, not making my future look too good when it comes back to the preseason. It
happens.
It does. I expected a lot more from Deshaun Harris-Smith and Jamie Kaiser. I know they played a little bit better of late, but still pretty inconsistent. Harris-Smith was a 5-star freshman, and he has been not anything close to that, at least when it comes to his offensive efficiency. But one last thing on the Big Ten, Purdue, I kind of make this conference overall. I think it's a pretty bad Big Ten conference when you look year over year. I don't know how much Purdue is going to want to win the conference tournament title. Obviously, every team wants to win it, but they won it last year trying to make a deep run in when it comes to the actual NCAA tournament. So if they get bounced in the semifinal, okay. Illinois has outperformed expectations playing one of the worst schedules across college basketball. Their best win may be FAU, which has underperformed, at least the public's perception, not our perception as bettors, a little bit of a fluky run to the Final Four. Last year, Wisconsin has struggled of late. Northwestern dealing with the Tiberi injury. Nebraska, so good at home, not so much on the road. Michigan State is a mess because Tom Izzo keeps favoring his veterans over 5-star freshmen that can actually space the floor. So I really think the league tournament's going to be wide open, man.
I do too. Again, like you said, there's a lot there. You talk about Maryland, and they're going to sit in like the top 50 of a lot of rankings and be in the bottom third of the conference in standings. So yeah, I do think they can get a little momentum rolling. And sometimes you see these teams coming from the first rounds, not getting the buys, starting to feel good, win a few games in a row. Should be fun. We're like 2 days from March. I can't wait. It's gonna be a great couple weeks.
Wednesday night card finale, at least here on Outside Shots. I'm gonna let you handle this one. I have a nugget on one of them when it comes to their long-term outlook. But Louisiana Tech at Western Kentucky, two of the top 3 teams in the Conference USA standings. I make this a little over La Tech -1.5, Haslam, Louisiana Tech -2 projection in terms of the total 146. Western Kentucky won this first matchup by 5 on the road. Granted, Louisiana Tech didn't have Talik Chavez, their second best 3-point shooter, but what do you make of this one in the second of two meetings, at least in the regular season?
I mean, this is one of the craziest games you're ever going to try to handicap. Huge game here in what is this, Conference USA? And Eli, we were texting back and forth. We mentioned like Conference USA losing so many key members. Of course, a lot of these big schools doing really well. FAU, Charlotte. It's been fun to watch these products coming from this conference, but the product's still good here. And Louisiana Tech is locked in a battle with Sam Houston, who has just come over into the conference. Western Kentucky's in third. This is a clash of teams that look so different. Western Kentucky is the fastest paced team in the country. If you haven't watched them play, it's crazy. And Louisiana Tech is a little slow. So we're going to see another clash. I tend to think this one ends up going a little bit differently. Shot quality had this one going towards Louisiana Tech. Western Kentucky won 81-76. Shot quality saw an L-Tech win of 72-69. So getting that away win, I tend to lean towards Louisiana Tech, who is, I believe, one of the few teams who is like leading their conference in I believe, both offensive and defensive metrics. I'm not sure if that has still stood up, but
it does.
They are dominating. So I think revenge on the mind, a loss they probably feel like they shouldn't have taken. If they have shot quality, they know they were expected to win it. So yeah, the defense looks so good for this team. I think Western Kentucky, even though they're kind of high flying and they move really fast, it's not super effective. So give me a nice win for Louisiana Tech here on the road. I think we'll get that favorable help from the market. So hopefully we can get something like a pick'em, and I'll take the road team here in Louisiana Tech to get that win back on their record.
I got to give, by the way, shout out to Steve Lutz, what he's done, bringing in a couple key transfers. Rodney Howard from Georgia Tech, one of the more underrated bigs from that conference, at least over the last couple seasons. And then Dante Allen, too. I know he was there last year, but if you remember him from a couple years ago at Kentucky. So pretty underrated transfer because he means a lot to them when it comes to their floor spacing. And then on the flip side for Louisiana Tech, I can't wait if this team gets in the tournament. I'm talking about March Madness as a 13 seed or maybe even a 12 if they go on a run here down the stretch. Daniel Baccio transferring over from Texas Tech, averaging a double-double. And this team overall, like you said, first in adjusted offense and adjusted defense of the conference. But overall this season, 42nd in adjusted defensive efficiency across Division I. Elite defense, really good rim protection with Baccio leading the way. If they get into the dance, man, I know everything depends on matchups, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I kind of expect one win. This kind of being an upset potentially, whoever La Tech gets matched up against.
They're a very good team. I would not want this to be, the mid-major I run up against. They're currently leading shot quality, which makes sense. They lead shot quality in expected defense against shots at the rim. I mean, that's just feeling Baccio's presence. The expected metrics line up with that. They have a little bit of trouble attacking the rim themselves, but yeah, they're a bona fide top 100 program. I think they could give a lot of teams a run for their money. It is not going to be fun to see what they do. They are the number one defense against half court sets by shot quality in the entire nation, allowing an expected 0.85 points per possession. And then, transition too, under 1 point possession in transition is sixth in the nation by shot quality. It's a lot of really, really good numbers. Lead in finishing at the rim. It's going to be hard. They're going to make anyone's day really tough. They're going to lock down the paint. They're going to know that you're going to have no choice but to either shoot like well contested shots on the interior, or you're going to end up taking some 3-point shots, but they also chase you off the line. So a lot of mid-range shots on defense. And again, as long as they don't maybe get a matchup against like a St. John's and a team that can destroy your drop coverage, I think they could be a tough out for anyone.
Finale here on Outside Shots, looking ahead to Thursday night, Gonzaga at San Francisco. Great mid-major matchup, just like the last one that we discussed. Haslam makes it around Gonzaga -2. I have it around that number as well. Gonzaga winning the first matchup between these two teams at the Kennel by 5, up double digits with just over 2 minutes left. So maybe a little bit of a fluky final score if you look at a 5-point margin versus what the game was at over the last couple of minutes before reserves came in. But what do you guys over at Shot Quality make this game?
We got this one as a dead even heat, slight .2 point edge for Gonzaga, total projected at 149.5. Man, what a battle. Yeah, so Gonzaga won this by 5 at home, expected to win it by 9. So now, depending what the line is, I do lean a little bit towards Gonzaga. I think they still have the shot making that you want from a team to get it done in tough scenarios. Don't allow opponents to get to the free throw line. Don't let opponents take the most valuable shots. Keep good care of the ball, top 25 type level of turnover percent on offense. The spacing, a little bit lackluster this season, maybe not what you used to see in past years from this Gonzaga product. The defense maybe missing a little bit of that oomph, but still super efficient attack in the rim, getting offensive rebounds. They maybe need to go away from the post-up game a little bit. Their frequency of post-ups is 4th highest in the nation. They're really good at it, but of course, that style of shot, being a top 20 team in the nation in terms of your post-up expectancy, still only generates 0.9 points per possession. They can just go to the catch and shoot and increase their efficiency by 10%. So they should probably just continue to shoot more. I'm obviously always going to say take a lot of threes or get to the rim, but they clearly can do it in the post. So that can be a very good clutch time shot. This is going to be a close game. Eileen Gonzaga, probably take the money line. And, maybe if you think this is where they start their run, this is a good time as ever to get in on them, because if they do get an away win against a tough conference opponent, someone that is giving them a little bit of a run here for the conference itself, I think the price probably goes down if they get a good win on the road here against San Fran.
Yeah, and looking at some of the numbers from the last matchup, looking at USF's rim defense and post-up defense overall, they both rank in the 79th percentile across college basketball, or better, at least in the 79th percentile when it comes to their rim defense and post-up defense. But in the last matchup, Watson and Graham Ike, you mentioned Gonzaga's post defense, or post offense, I should say. Ike did that at Wyoming, and now we're seeing it again with Gonzaga, especially when you go back to that Kentucky matchup from a few weeks ago at Rupp. He dominated the Wildcats down low, but they were both super efficient in their last meeting against the Dons. So I'm kind of wondering what's going to give in this matchup. That's also why I give Gonzaga a slight edge per my projection. Now, USF is playing really good ball, nearly upsetting St. Mary's on the road. Last week they covered Jonathan Mambo, one of the best transfers in the country that nobody is talking about, kind of in line with Bacho averaging a double-double. I'm curious what San Francisco's pricing is going to be for the West Coast Conference tournament. St. Mary's not going to need to win that one to get in. Gonzaga probably, unless they go on a run to the title game, maybe lose a close one to the Gales, and then they get an at-large, maybe even the play-in game in Ohio. But I don't know, man. Dons could be interesting as another long shot.
Yep, they could. I think they definitely have the chops on offense. The defense needs maybe a little bit of support, but if you're looking for a ticket like, a Sweet 16, Elite 8 type run, I don't see them, Final Four would be spectacular. But, getting out of that first weekend, I don't see as totally impossible for this team. Shot quality has a lot of good things to say about them. Top 5 efficiency in both attacking the rim and transitions. So, again, it's really going to be about the defense. They do force a lot of turnovers. So, that's a big deal, right? Like shot quality, if we could give it its most pure name, would be possession quality. And so the more possessions you get, the more likely you are to win a basketball game. I don't know. There was a crazy example last night of like a team taking like way more shots and losing, but usually you get more shots, you win more games. So forcing turnovers, getting to the line, good defensive rebounding. Again, the real issue for them is they need to improve their defense around the rim. They are due to be doing a bit better in it, but it definitely has been a little too good for their opponents, which is probably going to handicap them in the tournament. So I'm a little out on them. I need to see a good finish here. Of course, they do not have a cakewalk of the last 2 games. They play Gonzaga here at home, and then they're going to Santa Clara, which is not going to be an easy game whatsoever. So, great team, 21-7, should be 18-10 per shot quality, but the defense is really what's going to hold them back here, I think, at the end of the season. So a little pump into the brakes, but to win the conference tournament, I dig it, especially maybe with St. Mary's looking ahead already.
Right. Gonzaga, like you said, if they win this
Floundering.
game, price is going to be pretty steep, especially if they win at St. Mary's in one of the regular season finales, on top of the fact that those two teams likely to link up, at least per what the odds are going to be to win the West Coast Conference tournament in that specific market. But wrapping it up here, Justin, biggest edge for me of the games we discussed per my raw numbers, really only Maryland, especially if that line is at or under a possession. What numbers and what kind of bets are you looking to make just to stamp home?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some really interesting meat on the bone for Wednesday. I'm taking a look at some of those games. Like I said, I'm probably going to be on Loyola-Chicago. That's probably, I guess, my biggest edge for Tuesday if you want that game. But in terms of, maybe taking a look at that Auburn-Tennessee game, I do like that under. There's going to be some good spots for unders here towards the end of the season. I think we're starting to see a little bit of that slowdown. Some of these games start to mean a little bit more. Defense comes out, players have played 27 games now. Motivations start changing. You can maybe start handicapping spots based on, what teams need for conference tournaments, for seedings. Everything starts to get so interesting. Some teams start to pack it in and go home and look forward to, their breaks here after the college basketball season a little bit. But yeah, that under for Auburn, Tennessee feels really good. And I think the Ramblers go into St. Bonnie's and cap off what has been a disappointing year for Bonaventure.
You can follow Justin Perry at JustinPerry8 on X. You can follow me at Eli Herskovich. You can follow the lines at the Lines US. Justin, any promos before we get out of here? I know you have some shot quality bets live streams coming up later this week and the launch of your own new show.
Yeah, it's a big week. I mean, March around the corner. We got to do it right. Shot Quality Live Betcast will be Tuesday, Thursday, 7:45 p.m. We tap into those big 7 p.m. slates. Use Shot Quality's brand new live regression model to attack live bets, in-play bets, halftime bets. It's been a lot of fun, hitting around 58, 59% throughout about 350 bets in 24 episodes. So it's been a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I'm launching my own talk show. It's a new little experiment. Excited to hopefully have you on at some point, Eli. But just panel-style discussion. It's called The Justin Perry Show, but it's going to be the least about me possible. Excited to just have like unique voices coming on, talking about basketball, giving some high-level opinions, but, doing it in like a casual way. Just a bunch of smart friends gathering around, talking about some college hoops, joining the chat. So hopefully we just have a good time and develop a nice community there. So really excited about it, and I think it's going to be pretty unique.
Great episode of Outside Shots. If you want to share your best bet or thoughts on our edges for this week's games, you could do so in the comment section on YouTube. You could also subscribe, rate, and review to Outside Shots. Just search The Lines on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Would really, really appreciate it if you don't mind giving a 5-star review and rating. Always helps boost the podcast. You could also use promo code The Lines over at BetMGM Sportsbook. One word. If you bet $5, you get up to $150 back in bonus bets instantly. And you could also find all of our bets over at thelines.com when it comes to our staff members in real time in the Lines free Discord channel. Link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner. So for Justin and for myself, Eli Herskovich, thanks for watching and listening to another edition of Outside Shots. We'll be back on Friday. So long, everybody, and good luck with your bets.